Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the incident that occurred in Memphis, Tennessee that resulted in the death of Tyre Nichols. The body camera footage has been released, and I've been reluctant to talk about this incident until I've seen the body camera footage. And now that it's out and I have seen it, I think it's time to talk about what happened that day. I think we're going to start with the official narrative, and the official narrative was that on January the 7th, 2023, at about 8:30 p.m., officers with Memphis Police Department attempted to do a traffic stop on a vehicle that they said was driving recklessly. The official account said that the driver of that vehicle ended up resisting arrest and fleeing, was later apprehended, and while they were trying to detain him, several officers had uses of force, and due to those uses of force, Mr. Nichols went to the hospital. Unfortunately, Mr. Nichols died 3 days later when there is an in-custody death as a result of police action. That leads to an internal investigation. That internal investigation resulted in 5 police officers being fired and is subsequently charged with charges ranging from second-degree murder to felonious assault and misconduct while in office. So those officers have been fired and arrested and charged, and now the body camera footage has been released. We're not going to watch too much of the body camera footage today. We're going to watch a little bit of it. We're going to watch about a minute and a half, to be honest. I think that the amount of footage that I have chosen is the appropriate amount, and it's going to paint the picture for what actually happened that night and how everything went down. It's also going to dispel a lot of rumors about what happened that night, because I'm still seeing comments and stuff from people who apparently haven't been paying attention. So just so that we're all on the same page, I want to watch a little bit of the body camera footage. This is the footage from the initial traffic stop and then when he ended up resisting arrest and fleeing.
You get your ass blown the fuck out! Get the fuck out the car! Get the fuck out the fucking car! Damn, I didn't do anything! Turn your own fucking ass! Hey, I didn't turn your ass around! Alright. On the ground, Hey, you don't do that, okay? Get on the fucking ground! Get on the ground! Okay. I think you tased your ass! Alright, I'm on the ground. Lay down! Chest up. Please get on the ground! I think you tased you! Get on the ground! Lay down! One! Now! I'm tasing! Alright, okay. Turn your bitch ass right back. Break your shit. Okay, dude, damn! Turn the fuck around. Put your fucking hands on your back! Bitch, put your hands on your back while I break. Okay, stop. I'm gonna knock your ass the fuck out. You guys are really doing a lot right now. Bro, lay down. I'm just trying to go home. Lay down. Man, if you don't lay down. I am on the ground. Put your hands on your stomach. I'm spraying. Okay. Get the fuck back. Stop! I'm not doing it. Oh, shit.
There's a lot to talk about in that 90-second clip that I just showed you. This was an absolute shit show. Nothing that occurred on that part of the video that you watched, and actually nothing that occurred for the remainder of all the body camera footage that was released, none of that is what police officers are trained to do. I think I want to start off by saying that the officers were claiming they stopped him for reckless operation of a motor vehicle. The chief, when she made her statements about the officers being fired and then their subsequent arrest, one of the things that she said was that during their investigation, they did not find any evidence that there was any reckless operation of a motor vehicle occurring, or they couldn't find anything to substantiate that claim. That leads into one of the first points that I want to address is that I've heard and I'm seeing people say, if he just would have complied, he would be okay today. If he hadn't resisted arrest, none of this would have happened. often that statement is very true. I don't think it's appropriate today. And I think that anybody that's making that statement is somebody that has not yet seen this video, because there's what we saw. The chief is saying there's no evidence to substantiate the claim that he was driving recklessly. So we have a guy that might have been speeding a little bit. It's, you can see the roads. It doesn't appear to be a lot of traffic out there. There weren't a lot of cars driving by. Maybe he was speeding down the road, and this was a violent crime suppression task force. Maybe he's a criminal that they wanted to get their hands on. They watched him speeding, so they ran up and they did this traffic stop. He's sitting in his car thinking, okay, I'm being pulled over by the police, but there's no evidence that they activated their overhead lights. I don't see any red and blue lights. I don't see anything like that going on. And he stopped at a red light in the center lane. He's not pulled off to the right side of the road. The officers ran up to his vehicle and just immediately began screaming at him. They were screaming, "I'm going to beat your ass. Get out of the fucking car. Get on the ground." All of this stuff happened in a very, very short period of time. And I can tell you that as a driver, if I were simply speeding down the road and then all of a sudden I had 3 or 4 police officers circling my car, yelling and screaming at me, I would be quite disoriented. And I would probably not be the most compliant person in the world. I'm not going to say that I'm going to jump out of the car and start shooting at him or start, punching him, swing on him or anything like that. But there's a good chance that I would probably be responding in a similar manner that he did. And then it gets into the kind of stop. And I do have some notes here that I want to kind of go over so that I just want to make sure I don't forget anything, right? So like I mentioned before, when they approached the car, there was absolutely no self-control. They immediately began starting to yell at him and scream at him, threatening him. They ripped him out of the vehicle. They forced him to the ground. They had his hands while they were demanding that he give him their hands. There was an officer out in front of him. He was kind of laying on his side. His one hand was stretched out in front of him. An officer had him by the wrist. Another officer was behind him, had him by this wrist, and had that wrist pinned down to his side. Meanwhile, at least a third officer was behind him on his legs and had his taser pressed up against his hamstring glute area. There were 3 officers. They had him physically under control. They were demanding that he roll over, but they had him under control. All they had to do was push him over and he would have been able to roll over. Then what happened was the officer who was holding his outstretched hand that was out on the ground out here let go of that hand, grabbed his pepper spray, started pepper spraying Mr. Nichols, and in that process pepper sprayed the officer that was standing behind him as well. Realistically, what happened was all 3 or 4 officers ended up letting go of him. He stood up, and to his best recollection, what happened was he was just stopped in the middle of the road, had 4 people pull him out of his car, start beating his ass for basically no reason. He decided that it was in his best interest to take off running, and that's what he did. I don't think his reaction to being pulled over and stopped this way was that unreasonable of a reaction from somebody given the circumstances. Then what happened was he's already stood up. He's already made the decision that he's going to run away, and an officer attempts to use a taser on him. The one officer was already stumbling around because he got a face full of mace and he couldn't see. So this officer pops the taser. The taser was ineffective, and it was apparent very clearly early on that it was ineffective. You can tell by the way the taser was cycling that it was not effective and that the guy wasn't going to the ground. I'll go ahead and add that clip back in right here. So the stupid thing is you've got one officer who's going to fall back to his vehicle because he's whining and crying that he can't see because he got maced. Another officer attempts to use a taser, with absolutely no follow-up is completely oblivious to the fact that the taser was ineffective and that the suspect is now running away. It takes him a couple of moments, like an exceptional long period of time, for an officer to realize that his taser was not effective before he makes the most slight attempt at running down the street after the suspect. When I saw this, and I was talking to some of my friends about it, and I saw some people talking about subject control, whatever. This looked to me as if they stopped him for the purpose of beating him down. I don't think that this was a traffic stop in any sense of the word. You know, I saw a lot of people saying, you know, this is senseless, that this was all out of a traffic stop. If he would have just complied, this would have been okay. I don't believe that to be the case at all. I believe that even if he had complied, he still would have gotten his ass beat, because I believe from watching this part of the video, that was their intention the entire time. Then he was able to get away, and he ran for a little while. He was eventually caught, and when he was caught, it just got worse. He was taken to the ground. The officers just continued to beat on him, kicked him in the head while his head was on the ground. At one point, he was on the ground with his hands both pinned out, and another officer, who I believe maced himself while he was trying to spray mace in his eyes, recovered slightly, ran over, and began kicking him in the head while he was on the ground. Then the two officers who had him by the arms picked him up. He was halfway on his knees, halfway on his feet, kind of stumbling, and another officer came with his baton and said, "I'm going to baton the fuck out of him," and began wailing on him with his baton. A period of time went by after that where they continued to beat on him, where two officers once again picked him up. He stood up, and that's when one of the officers was literally just dropping haymakers on his head, teeing off on him. At no point in time did the officers ever try to effect an arrest. At no point in time did they ever try to put him in cuffs. For much of the video, he was basically limp and passively resisting. Every single use of force that I witnessed was completely unacceptable and unnecessary. Some of the things that I've seen from people saying, oh, well, you know, he was a violent criminal. The officers knew that. You don't know that about him. So that might have had an effect on their actions. I can tell you personally that that is a bullshit excuse. There is literally no excuse for the way those officers handled that situation. I've arrested hundreds, if not thousands, of violent people. I have arrested I know for a fact I've arrested murderers on murder warrants. I've arrested big time drug dealers. I've arrested all kinds of gang members and the like. I've pulled guns out of the waistband of gang members who were not handcuffed at the time and never observed a use of force like this. One thing that I've said many, many times in the past, and I've said it on this channel, and I will usually respond to people in the comments with this, when they complain that there's so many officers on scene, like, why do you need so many officers for like one little girl? You know, it's always this 16-year-old girl, and there's like 5 officers trying to hold her down. And my response to that is, well, the more officers, the more safe it is for the suspect or the person that is being arrested. Because if I am trying to place someone under arrest and that person is resisting with the maximum of their ability, and it's just the two of us, that becomes a very dangerous situation. My life is in danger in that situation. So therefore, I'm going to bring my level of force probably up a couple levels from what they're doing to make sure that I go home safely at the end of the day, because it's their responsibility not to resist in that situation. When there are more and more officers, you don't have that leeway because you've got multiple guys holding this person's arms. How dangerous can he be? When you're trying to get his arms behind his back, if he's resisting hard, you might break one of his arms. You might hurt a joint. You might tear his shoulder out of place. These are all things that are a result of his resistance. But it's showing that you are doing the least amount of effort to hurt him, or, you weren't trying to hurt him. It's just that he was hurt in the process of you trying to put his hands behind his back. That's the kind of thing that would happen. If it's just me and him alone, I might start dropping bombs on his face. If it's me, him, and 3 other officers, you're not going to do that, if you know what I'm saying. This situation, for some reason, they all acted like they were the only ones there. They were freaking out the entire time. They kept calling for 10-3s on the radio over and over and over again, demanding more cars, more cars, more cars. You would have thought that their lives were all in danger, when in actuality, they were ragdolling him. It was very, very difficult to watch. I mentioned before that the chief looked into this and found that there was no evidence that he was doing any reckless driving, and it was hard to articulate a reason for that stop, particularly a reason to run up on the car the way it did. So the officers were fired and subsequently charged. The question I have now is, what does this mean for policing? And what does this mean for people who are calling for reform? The question is, what do you think you're going to accomplish? Like, what reforms do you think you can put in place to prevent something like this from happening? I don't believe you can. This is a situation where a small group of officers, for lack of a better term, lost their fucking minds. This was horrible. But unfortunately, as long as police officers are human beings, there's always going to be that opportunity for someone to lose their cool. It's incredibly rare that this many people lose their cool at the same time. And it's absolutely tragic, but what rule can you put in place to prevent that from happening? I don't think you can. I don't think that there's any kind of reform or law that you can pass that's going to prevent this from happening. Everything that they did was already wrong. They're going to pay a very heavy price for what they did. The other question I want to ask is about these people that are out there protesting and rioting. What exactly is it that you are trying to accomplish? When we've had incidents before where people thought that it was police brutality and there was excessive use of force by the police, or usually it's, because somebody is shot by the police. So people go out and they protest and they riot and they're demanding justice. They're demanding that the police officers be arrested and locked up, taken off the streets, sent to prison, all that stuff. Here's a situation that before the public was even aware of the incident, as a matter of fact, the reason the public became aware of the incident is because the officers were fired and then they were charged with a crime. The way this came to light was an internal investigation. This is a situation where the police department investigated itself, found that its officers acted way outside of policy, and took immediate action against those officers. What occurred here as a response to the actions of these officers is the exact same thing that these protest groups have been demanding all these years. The officers have been fired. They've been charged. They're going to face justice. What do you think you're going to accomplish by blocking roads and preventing people from getting to their jobs? At the end of the day, this was one of the worst, might be one of the worst videos I've ever seen in my life. Regardless of if it's a police officer or not a police officer, just watching a group of human beings do this to another human being, it's terrifying. To believe that we as humans have that ability inside of us, I have a hard time comprehending it, to be honest with you. I don't know. I think those are going to be my thoughts for today. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you later.